The year is 600 BC. The world is not yet Persian. The lands of the Near East are divided, restless, and scarred by centuries of conquest. Empires rise and fall like the desert winds, but none imagine that in the barren highlands of a forgotten people, a power is waiting to awaken, one that will change history forever. The Near Eastern chessboard to the west lies Lydia, a kingdom of golden wealth, ruled by the legendary King Croesus's treasury is so vast that travelers say he can turn stones into gold. Merchants whisper that Lydia is the beating heart of trade, where the coins that will define future economies are first minted. To the south, the old giant still breeds Babylon. Its hanging gardens and towering ziggurats dominate Mesopotamia. Nebuchadnezzar II sits on the throne, feared for his power, admired for his splendor. Babylon is the jewel of civilization, but beneath its grandeur, political cracks begin to form. Its kings rule with iron fists, and its subjects quietly yearn for something different, something new. And to the north stands the Median Empire, a formidable power that binds tribes of warriors under King Astyages. The Medes are proud, their armies seasoned, their rule unchallenged. For now, the Near East is a world of empires, but it is also a world of arrogance. Each great kingdom believes itself eternal, blind to the storm gathering on their horizon. The forgotten land, Persia. From the golden palaces and busy markets, in the rugged plateau of modern-day Iran, lies Persia. At this time, it is nothing more than a vassal land subordinate to the Medes. Ignored by Babylon, dismissed by Lydia, its tribes live simple lives, herding, farming, paying tribute to masters who barely remember their names. The Persians are outsiders to the glittering world stage, but within their traditions lies something different, to unity born not from terror, but from loyalty. And from this soil will rise a man who will teach the world that empire does not have to be built only by blood and fear. The shadow of Assyria. Only a generation earlier, the region had been dominated by the Assyrian Empire, a war machine that ruled through brutality. Their kings carved warnings into stone, boasting of rivers of blood and cities reduced to ash. For over 2 centuries, Assyria ruled as the most feared empire in the world. But fear is a fragile foundation. By 612 BC, a coalition of Medes, Babylonians and Persians crushed Assyria. Its capital Nineveh was reduced to ruins, its people scattered, its name cursed. The fall of Assyria left a power vacuum, and into this void stepped Babylon, Media, and Lydia. These powers believed they had carved up the world for themselves. Yet, in the forgotten highlands of Persia, a seed had been planted, the idea that a new kind of empire could rise, one not built on terror alone, but on something lasting. A world at the edge of change. The 6th century BC is not just a time of shifting empires, it is a time of ideas. In Greece, philosophers begin to ask questions about the nature of existence. In India, Siddhartha Gautama will soon walk the path that becomes Buddhism. In China, Confucius is born a teacher who will shape morality for millennia. And in Persia, a prophet named Zarathustra, Zoroaster, preaches of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, truth and lies, a vision that will echo through the faiths of the world. This is the crucible in which Cyrus will rise, a fractured world, a restless people. A stage waiting for a conqueror who will not just wield the sword, but reshape the idea of empire itself, foreshadowing the dawn. No one could imagine it then. Not Croesus in his golden halls, not Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, not Astyages in his mountain strongholds. That from the rocky soil of Persia, a man would rise who would unite tribes, topple kings, and build an empire greater than any the world had seen. His name was Cyrus, but history would call him something else, Cyrus the Great. And this is where the dawn of Persia begins. History remembers kings in marble and stone, but every legend begins in shadow, uncertain, whispered, half hidden in myth. And so it was with the birth of Cyrus, the child who would become the dawn of Persia. Dreams of a king high in the Median capital of Ecbatana, King Astyages ruled with confidence. He was the master of the Medes, overlord of the Persians, and he believed his dynasty secure. But one night, Astyages dreamed a dream that shook his throne. In it, his daughter Mandane gave birth to a child, and from her womb flowed a flood of water that drowned Asia. In another vision, a vine grew from her body, stretching across the lands, overshadowing mountains and kingdoms alike. The court magi and seers whispered their interpretation. A child will be born to Mandane. He will rule in your place. He will take your throne. Fear gripped Astyages' dynasties fall, not by armies but by destiny. And so, he plotted to strangle destiny in the cradle. The infant in danger when Mandane bore a son, Astyages ordered his trusted general Harpagus to take the child and kill him. But Harpagus, perhaps moved by pity, could not bring himself to murder an innocent. Instead, he entrusted the newborn to a humble herdsman, Mithridates, and his wife. The child, destined for greatness, was raised not in palaces but in fields and mountains. He grew among shepherds, drinking the rugged life of the Persian highlands, learning endurance, strength, and the simplicity of common people. Legends say that, as a boy, Cyrus played games with other village children, often chosen as king in their make-believe. Even then, his natural authority showed itself commanding. Yet fair Astyages would later hear of a boy who ruled his playmates with uncanny confidence, punishing some, rewarding others, like a king on a throne. Suspicion grew. Perhaps the mage prophecy had not been thwarted after all. The revelation when Cyrus was about 10 years old. Stories of his behavior reached the Median court. Summoned before Astyages, the boy stood fearless, his presence already magnetic. The king recognized in his features the blood of Mandane, his own grandson, whom he had ordered killed. Enraged Astyages turned not on the boy, but on Harpagus. For disobeying his order, Harpagus was punished with a cruelty that would burn itself into legend. The king served him a feast of his own son's flesh. Horrified but silent, Harpagus swallowed both the meal and his vengeance. His hatred would one day become a weapon Cyrus could wield. The making of a prince, though Astyages had discovered the truth. He did not kill Cyrus. Perhaps fear of destiny restrained him. Perhaps the boy's charisma made him hesitate. Instead, Cyrus was allowed to live, raised at the Median court, trained in royal ways. Here, young Cyrus learned diplomacy, statecraft, and the art of war. But unlike other princes, he carried with him the memory of shepherd's fields, the taste of simplicity. He was both noble and humble, both ruler and man of the people. The Medes thought him a hostage of fate. In truth, he was being forged steel, tempered by fire, destiny shaped by hardship. Myth and memory to the Greeks who later wrote of him. Cyrus's childhood echoed the great heroes of myth, like Moses, saved from slaughter, like Romulus, raised among shepherds, like Alexander, destined to rule the world. But beneath the myth lay a truth. Cyrus was a child marked by survival, by prophecy, and by the strange mercy of chance. Every step of his early life seemed to whisper that his story was not his own. It belonged to history itself, foreshadowing the rebellion. By the time Cyrus reached manhood, the prophecy that haunted Astyages still lingered like smoke in the air. The Medes ruled the Persians, but the Persians never forgot their pride. And Cyrus, born of both Median royal blood and Persian earth, carried in him the spark of unity. The boy who should have died in the mountains had grown into a prince who believed he was destined for more than service to the Median throne. Somewhere, in his heart, he must have known. His destiny was not to kneel, but to rise. Not to serve, but to lead. Not to inherit a kingdom, but to build an empire. The story of Cyrus's childhood is half legend, half history, but whether told in whispers of shepherds, in the feasts of vengeance, or in the courts of kings, one truth remains. From the moment he was born, Cyrus was different. The world had tried to kill him, but the world had only made him stronger. The child of prophecy was ready, and soon the man would rise. The prophecy that haunted King Astyages could not be silenced. The boy who should have died in the mountains had grown into a man charismatic, bold, and already whispered of as a leader among Persians. What began as suspicion would soon ignite into full rebellion, a restless vassal for generations. The Persians had served the Median throne. They paid tribute, sent soldiers to foreign wars, and bent their necks before the king of Ecbatana. But beneath their obedience smoldered resentment. The Persians were proud of their highland traditions, proud of their endurance and simplicity. To them, Median luxury was weakness. They dreamed of freedom but lacked a leader who could unite them. That leader had arrived. His name was Cyrus. The spark of rebellion in the Persian heartland. Cyrus quietly gathered support. Tribal chiefs pledged loyalty, warriors swore oaths, and farmers sharpened blades in secret. Cyrus offered them not just rebellion, but destiny. Why serve when we were born to rule? Word of his defiance reached Ecbatana. Astyages, furious at his grandson's betrayal, called upon his general Harpagus. The irony was sharp. Years earlier, Harpagus had been forced to eat his own son because of Astyages' cruelty. His heart had never forgotten, his vengeance never cooled. Now the king commanded him to crush Cyrus, but Harpagus had other plans. The betrayal of Harpagus. The Median army marched to meet Cyrus. Harpagus secretly conspired with the Medes. Had fallen. Ecbatana, their jewel of a capital, now bowed to a new master. Cyrus stood not just as a conqueror, but as something greater, an architect of empire. Where other kings destroyed, Cyrus began to build a vision beyond conquest. In the ancient world, empires rose through terror. The Assyrians carved warnings in stone, boasting of severed heads and rivers of blood. The Babylonians crushed enemies under the weight of their walls. Kings ruled by fear, and their kingdoms crumbled when that fear faded. Cyrus saw another path. If an empire was to endure, it could not be built only on the sword. It had to be built on something stronger: loyalty. The satrap system. Cyrus divided his growing empire into provinces, called satrap. Each satrapy was ruled by a governor, often a noble or trusted general responsible for collecting tribute, administering justice, and commanding troops in the king's name. But unlike other rulers, Cyrus did not strip conquered peoples of their identity. Satraps allowed local customs, languages, and religions to flourish. A city could keep its gods, its laws, and its traditions, so long as it pledged loyalty to the Persian king. This system transformed rebellion into partnership. Instead of endless revolts, conquered nations found themselves integrated into something larger. It was revolutionary governance, an empire of many nations, bound not by chains but by shared prosperity. The roads of the empire to rule vast lands. Cyrus needed more than governance, he needed connection. Across Persia, new royal roads were laid, stretching over mountains and deserts, linking cities once isolated by distance. Messengers could travel with unprecedented speed, carrying the king's commands across hundreds of miles in days instead of weeks. The empire began to breathe as one body, its lifeblood, the roads that tied it together. Tolerance as power. Understood something most ancient kings ignored. Respect could be as powerful as fear. Where others desecrated temples, Cyrus restored them. Where others enslaved, he freed. Where others mocked foreign gods, Cyrus bowed in respect. This policy of tolerance was not weakness, it was strategy. A Jew in Babylon, a Mede in Ecbatana, a Lydian in Sardasich could see themselves in Cyrus's empire. And in this way, loyalty spread farther than conquest could reach. The king of many faces to the Medes, he was heir and unifier. To the Persians, he was liberator and chosen leader. To the Babylonians, he would become a restorer of gods and traditions. To the Jews, he was a divinely appointed savior, anointed by the Lord in their scriptures. Cyrus was not one king, he was many. Nations saw him as their own. This chameleon-like kingship became the cornerstone of his power. Justice and law. Legends tell of Cyrus's fairness in law. Unlike kings who crushed commoners beneath taxes and decrees, he listened to grievances, settled disputes and ensured justice even for the lowliest. In an age where kings were distant gods, Cyrus was seen as something different, a ruler who walked among men, who listened as well as commanded. This reputation spread like fire. Across his empire, people whispered, "This king is not like the others." The Persian identity. From the union of Medes and Persians, a new identity was born. It was not purely Persian, nor purely Median. It was something greater. Cyrus crafted symbols, rituals, and traditions that bound his people together. He was not merely building a state, he was forging a civilization, an identity that would outlast him, an empire that would echo across centuries. Foreshadowing the great conquests by laying the foundation of governance, Cyrus ensured his empire could expand without collapse. The satraps would manage provinces, the roads would carry orders, the policies of tolerance would prevent rebellion. Now Cyrus was ready for greater ambitions. His gaze turned westward toward the wealthy kingdom of Lydia, ruled by the golden king Croesus. The world would soon witness not just the builder, but the conqueror. Cyrus had done the impossible. He had taken a vassal tribe and turned it into an empire. He had replaced fear with loyalty, chains with respect, tyranny with justice, where others ruled for a lifetime. Cyrus was building something that would endure for centuries. This was the true dawn of Persian art. Just a land, not just a people, but an empire destined to shape the world. Far to the west, beyond the mountains of Anatolia, lay the kingdom of Lydia. It was a land of unimaginable wealth, ruled by a man whose name still echoes through time. Croesus. His treasury were overflowed with gold, his capital Sardis shone with luxury, and his power stretched from the Aegean Sea to the heart of Asia Minor. To the Greeks, Croesus was a legend. To Cyrus, he was a challenge, the oracle's warning before the war began. Croesus sought counsel from the famous oracle of Delphi. He asked if he should march against the rising power of Persia. The Pythia replied with words that would seal his fate. "If you cross the river Halys, you will destroy a great empire." Croesus left believing the gods were on his side. He did not consider that the great empire might be his own. The march to war. Cyrus's army advanced westward, hardened by campaigns and united by his vision. The Persians were disciplined, the Medes loyal, and his cavalry unmatched. Croesus, confident in his gold and allies, prepared for battle. The two forces met in 547 BC, on the plains of Cappadocia near the Halys River. The first clash. The battle raged as steel rang against steel. Lydian cavalry, famed for their speed, charged the Persian lines. Dust clouds rose as thousands of hooves thundered across the plain. But Cyrus was no ordinary commander. He adapted quickly, turning Persian troops into walls of resilience, forcing Croesus back as the sun set. Neither side had won a decisive victory. Croesus, believing winter would halt the Persians, withdrew to Sardis, planning to gather reinforcements from his Greek allies. But Cyrus did not wait. He pursued the siege of Sardis. Croesus's capital sat proud upon a steep hill, with walls that seemed unbreakable. Its treasury overflowed with unimaginable riches, gold coins, ornaments, and the wealth of nations. The Lydians were confident. No army had ever taken Sardis by force. Cyrus encircled the city. Days turned to weeks, supplies dwindled. Still the walls stood firm. Then came the breakthrough. The fall of the wall. One evening, a Persian soldier observed something unusual. A Lydian guard, high up on the walls, accidentally dropped his helmet. Without hesitation, the guard climbed down a hidden path to retrieve it, then climbed back up. The Persians had discovered what the Lydians believed was impossible, a secret route up the cliffs. That night, under the cover of darkness, Cyrus's men scaled the path. They reached the walls unnoticed. When the gates were thrown open, the city fell in a storm of chaos. The invincible Sardis had been breached. The captured king Croesus, once the richest man in the world, was dragged before Cyrus. His kingdom was gone, his allies nowhere to be found. His prophecy shattered. The Persians prepared a pyre, intending to burn the defeated king. But as flames rose, Croesus cried out the name of another wise man, Solon of Athens, who had once warned him, "Count no man happy until the end of his life." Cyrus, intrigued by these words, paused. He ordered the fire to be extinguished, sparing Croesus's life. In that moment, the conqueror showed mercy, and Croesus became not a corpse, but an advisor. The gold of Lydia with Sardis captured, Cyrus gained not only a kingdom, but also its treasure. Lydia's wealth flowed into Persia, fueling the empire's expansion. The gold of Croesus became the foundation of Persian coinage, trade, and influence. Cyrus had defeated not only an army but the very symbol of wealth itself. A turning point. In history, the fall of Croesus echoed across the ancient world. Greek city-states trembled. The power balance shifted, and Persia emerged as a true empire stretching from the east to the shores of the Aegean. Cyrus had proven himself not just a builder of nations, but a master of conquest. Where once he united Persians and Medes, now he had humbled one of the richest kings in history. And beyond Lydia lay even greater Despobabu in Egypt, and lands whispered of in legend. Cyrus stood at the gates of destiny. The gold of Lydia was his. The world was watching, and the King of Kings was only just beginning. In the heart of Mesopotamia stood the greatest city the world had ever known, Babylon. Its walls were said to be so wide that 4 horse-drawn chariots could race across them. Its gates towered high, plated with bronze. Its temples glittered with offerings of gold and jewels. Too many. Babylon was unconquerable. To Cyrus it was destiny. The city of the gods, Babylon, was ruled by King Nabonidus, a man who had turned away from the city's traditional gods. He neglected the mighty temple of Marduk, angering the priests and dividing his people. Inside the city, unrest simmered. The nobles grumbled, the common folk whispered of betrayal, and far beyond the walls Cyrus prepared his army. The Persians did not come only with soldiers, they came with a message: freedom, not destruction. The gathering storming 539 BC. Cyrus marched eastward, his banners flowing like rivers of fire across the plains. His generals lead armies that seemed endless, Persians, Medes and allies bound together by his vision at Opis. Near the Tigris River, the Babylonians attempted to resist, but Cyrus crushed them with brutal efficiency. Thousands fell, and the city surrendered. Babylon's last defenders retreated behind their colossal walls. The greatest siege in history was about to begin. The impregnable walls the Babylonians laughed from the ramparts. Their walls rose higher than any ladder, thicker than any ram could break. Inside the city, the Euphrates River flowed directly through its heart, bringing water, food and supplies. Babylon could withstand years of siege. Cyrus knew this. He also knew he had neither the time nor the patience. He devised a plan, the river trick according to ancient chronicles. Cyrus turned not to force, but to cunning. His engineers began digging massive canals and trenches. Night after night, they worked in silence, diverting the flow of the Euphrates away from the city. Then, one fateful night, as the Babylonians feasted in celebration of a great festival, the waters of the Euphrates receded. The riverbed lay exposed, muddy, silent, and unguarded. Cyrus's soldiers marched through the empty channel, slipping beneath the mighty walls of Babylon. The city that had defied empires for centuries had left its gates unguarded, believing itself eternal. The fall of the great city. When dawn came, Babylon awoke not to the sound of their own trumpets, but to the banners of Persia fluttering above their towers. There was no great battle, no blood in the streets. The city had been taken without destruction. The people, weary of Nabonidus's neglect, welcomed Cyrus as a liberator, the liberator king. Unlike conquerors before him, Cyrus did not burn temples, nor did he enslave the population. Instead, he restored worship to Marduk, honored the traditions of the Babylonians, and returned idols of conquered peoples to their rightful shrines. Most famously, he issued a decree: the exiled peoples of Babylon, including the Jews who had been captive for decades, were free to return to their homelands. This decree, etched into clay and preserved in the Cyrus cylinder, is considered by many historians the first charter of human rights. The world changes forever with Babylon's fall. Cyrus became master of an empire stretching from the Aegean to the mountains of Central Asia, from the deserts of Arabia to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. No man before him had united so many nations, cultures and faiths under a single rule. Yet unlike the tyrants of old, he did not demand uniformity. He ruled with tolerance, blending power with respect. Babylon, the eternal city, had bowed not to a destroyer but to a builder. The echo of greatness as Cyrus walked through the Ishtar Gate. Beneath the shining blue tiles decorated with lions and dragons, he knew he had achieved more than conquest. He had written his name in the very fabric of history. From this moment forward, kings and empires would be measured against him. The Babylonians called him the shepherd chosen by Marduk, the Jews called him the anointed of the Lord, and the world would forever know him as Cyrus the Great. The dawn of a new era. The fall of Babylon was not the end, but the beginning. An empire unlike any other now stood, stretching wider than the imagination. The Persians had not just conquered a city, they had changed civilization itself. And at its heart stood one man, Cyrus, the King of Kings, who turned war into liberation, conquest into freedom, and empire into unity. Cyrus had seized Babylon, but in truth, Babylon had crowned him eternal. The dust of Babylon's conquest had barely settled, yet Cyrus's true genius was only beginning to emerge. Many kings had conquered vast lands before him, but most empires crumbled within a generation, torn apart by rebellion, greed, and oppression. Cyrus was different. He did not just build an empire, he built a system that could endure. The vision of a united empire, from the highlands of Persia to the temples of Babylon, from the mountains of Anatolia to the deserts of Egypt. Dozens of nations, faiths, and languages now bent to Cyrus's rule. How could one man govern such diversity? Most conquerors would impose their own culture by force, silencing the traditions of the conquered. But Cyrus understood a deeper truth. Unity comes not from chains, but from respect. So he declared a new principle. Every nation under Persia would keep its own gods, its own laws, and its own traditions, the satrap system to rule his vast dominion. Cyrus created something revolutionary: the satrapy system. The empire was divided into provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap or regional governor. These men held immense power. They collected taxes, commanded local armies, and oversaw justice. Yet they were never fully independent. For every satrap, Cyrus placed a network of royal inspectors, known as the king's eyes and ears. These secret overseers traveled the empire, reporting directly to the throne, ensuring loyalty, and crushing corruption before it could grow. It was a balance of power, a web of accountability centuries ahead of its time. The king's justice. Unlike many rulers of the ancient world, Cyrus was not remembered as cruel or arbitrary. His reputation was that of a just king. He respected local laws. If you lived in Babylon, you were judged by Babylonian codes. If you lived in Lydia, you followed Lydian traditions, but over all of it stood the king's law, a set of universal principles that bound the empire together. Above all, Cyrus banned oppression and cruelty. His decrees promised freedom of worship, the right to return to one's homeland, and the protection of conquered peoples. In an age of tyranny, such laws were unthinkable. The Cyrus cylinder, one of history's most important artifacts, still carries his voice. The Cyrus cylinder, discovered in Babylon, etched in Akkadian cuneiform. It records his decree after conquering the city. He restored temples. He returned sacred idols to their shrines. He freed enslaved peoples and allowed them to return to their lands. Some call it the first charter of human rights, a vision of governance not built on fear, but on dignity. For the Jews, it was the decree that ended their Babylonian captivity, allowing them to rebuild their temple in Jerusalem. To this day, Cyrus is remembered in the Hebrew Bible as the Lord's anointed. The King of Kings. Cyrus's title was not merely King of Persia. He styled himself King of the Four Corners of the world. Yet unlike other monarchs, he did not demand worship, where Mesopotamian kings called themselves gods. Cyrus remained mortal, a servant of Ahura Mazda, his faith's supreme deity. This humility earned him loyalty. To his subjects, he was not a distant tyrant, but a shepherd chosen by heaven to protect them. The roads of empire, but justice alone could not hold an empire together. Cyrus understood the power of infrastructure. He began building the royal roads, vast highways that connected the farthest edges of Persia. Messengers could travel hundreds of miles in days, carrying orders sealed with a royal mark. Armies could march swiftly, crushing rebellion before it spread. Trade flourished, wealth multiplied, and cultures blended across borders. The empire was not only strong, it was alive, pulsing like a great heart, the balance of fear and trust. Of course, Cyrus was no saint. He still commanded the largest army the world had seen. His rule was absolute. His word was law, but he wielded power with calculation. Rebellion was crushed swiftly, yet mercy often followed victory. Fear secured obedience, but trust secured loyalty. And in this balance lay the secret of Persia's strength, the legacy of his laws for centuries after his death. Persian kings would continue to rule using the systems Cyrus had built. Even when Alexander the Great later conquered Persia, he studied and admired Cyrus's governance, modeling parts of his own rule after him. And thousands of years later, when modern nations debated the principles of freedom and human rights, the words of Cyrus would echo once more. The eternal log of Cyrus had begun as a warrior, but in the twilight of his reign, he was remembered not for his battles, but for his laws. He was more than a conqueror, more than a king. He was the King of Kings, the ruler who gave law to the world. And in every inscription, in every memory, his name was spoken with reverence: Cyrus the Great. The Persian Empire stretched farther than any before it, from the mountains of Anatolia to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, from the deserts of Iran to the gates of India. Cyrus the Great ruled a world united under his banner. But for a man who had never known defeat, conquest was not just ambition, it was destiny. And destiny demanded one last war: the enemy. Beyond the river to the northeast of Persia lay a wild frontier, the steppes beyond the Sia Daria River. Here lived the Masajiti, a fierce nomadic people who knew no king, no city, and no chains. They were horsemen of the plains, hardened by endless horizons and boundless freedom. Their queen, Tamiris, was as ruthless as she was proud. Legends called her a warrior equal to any man, commander of a nation that had never been conquered. Cyrus, that crushed kingdoms and humbled emperors. But Tamiris would prove to be unlike any foe he had faced. The warning before the war began. Cyrus sent envoys across the river. He offered Queen Tamiris a choice: surrender peacefully, or face the might of Persia. Her reply was cold and defiant: rule your own people. Cyrus, do not seek to rule mine. If you hunger for blood, then cross the river, and I will give you your fill. It was not just a rejection, it was a challenge. Cyrus, now in his late 60s, could have chosen peace. He, who had already achieved immortality through empire. But pride, perhaps mixed with destiny, drove him forward. To trap the Masajiti were skilled in open battle, their cavalry swift and deadly. Cyrus knew he could not defeat them in a fair fight, so he devised a stratagem on the Persian side of the river. He set a lavish banquet tables laden with wine, roasted meats, and treasures of the empire. Then he withdrew his army, leaving only a small detachment to guard the feast. When the Masajiti arrived, they found the camp abandoned. They celebrated, feasting on Persian food and drinking deeply of Persian wine, a luxury unknown to their people. But as night fell, intoxication dulled their senses. Cyrus struck. The Persians stormed the camp, slaughtering the warriors and capturing hundreds alive, including Tamiris's own son. Spargapis is the queen's fury. When news reached Queen Tamiris, her grief turned to fire. She sent word to Cyrus: release my son and leave my lands, or I will drown you in blood. But Spargapis, shamed by his capture, begged for freedom. Once unchained, he took his own life. The queen's sorrow became vengeance. She swore that Cyrus the Great, the conqueror of the world, would pay with his life. The Battle of the Steppes. Final confrontation came on the barren plains beneath an endless sky. The Persian army, seasoned and disciplined, stood in ranks of bronze and iron opposite them. The Masajiti thundered across the steppe, wild cavalry, fearless archers and warriors who fought as if death itself were a gift. The clash was apocalyptic. Arrows darkened the heavens, Spears shattered. Horses screamed as the earth shook beneath the charge. Cyrus himself rode into battle, his silver armor gleaming, his standard held high. For hours, the two forces bled each other, neither side yielding, but the were fighting for vengeance. Their fury outlasted Persian discipline. And as the sun dipped low, Cyrus the Great was struck down. The queen's revenge according to Herodotus. What followed was an act as brutal as it was symbolic. Queen Tomyris ordered Cyrus's body to be found among the fallen. When it was brought before her, she unsheathed her blade, severed his head, and plunged it into a wineskin filled with human blood. "Drink your fill of blood, Cyrus," she declared, "since it is what you thirsted for." Thus ended the life of the greatest conqueror of his age, not in triumph, but in a pool of blood, slain by a queen who would not bow. The death of an emperor. News of Cyrus's death rippled across the empire. In Babylon, priests mourned the liberator who had restored their gods. In Judea, the exiles grieved for the king who had freed them. In Persia, the people wept for the father of their nation. Yet, his legacy did not die with him. The tomb of Cyrus's body was carried back to the Persian heartland, to the city of Persia. There, a simple yet majestic tomb was raised, a stone monument without gold, without jewels, without arrogance. An inscription once marked its entrance: "O man, whosoever you are and from wherever you come, for I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire. Do not begrudge me this little earth that covers my body." No conqueror had ever spoken so humbly in death. The eternal conqueror, though his life ended on the battlefield, Cyrus's empire endured. His laws, his governance, his vision of tolerance outlived him by centuries. Even his enemies, who rejoiced in his fall, could not erase his greatness. Cyrus was not just a king, he was a builder of nations, a liberator, a labugiver. And in the end, even in defeat, his name became eternal: Cyrus the Great. The Persian Empire had expanded like fire across dry grass. From the mountains of Media to the golden halls of Lydia, Cyrus had bent kings and nations to his will. But one prize still loomed above all others: Babylon. For centuries, Babylon was more than just a city, it was the city. Its walls stretched higher than imagination, its temples glittered with gold, its hanging gardens were said to be one of the wonders of the world. To conquer Babylon was not just to seize a city, it was to claim the beating heart of civilization itself. A kingdom of shadows. But by 540 BC, Babylon was a shadow of its former glory. The great Nebuchadnezzar was dead, his conquests had faded, his grandeur cracked. On the throne now sat Nabonidus, a king unlike any Babylon had ever known. Where his predecessors had ruled through military might and strict ritual, Nabonidus turned his gaze to religion and archaeology. He dug through ancient ruins, searching for forgotten gods and forgotten truths, leaving the day-to-day running of his empire to his son Belshazzar. The people were restless. Priests whispered that Nabonidus had angered the powerful god Marduk by elevating lesser deities. Farmers and merchants complained of heavy taxes. Soldiers grumbled under poor leadership. Babylon was still rich, still proud, but beneath its stone walls lay discontent like dry timber waiting for a spark. Cyrus at the gate. Cyrus saw that spark. To him, Babylon was not just another conquest, it was destiny. By seizing Babylon, he could unite the lands of Mesopotamia, link east and west, and prove once and for all that Persia was more than a rising star. It was the sun itself. But Cyrus was no reckless warrior. He did not charge blindly at Babylon's walls. He knew its fortifications were legendary, walls so thick chariots could race atop them, gates of bronze, and a river running through the city that made siege almost impossible. Instead, he began with patience. His armies swept through the lands surrounding Babylon, cutting off allies, controlling trade routes, and persuading subject peoples to join him. Many welcomed him. To them, Cyrus was not just another conqueror, he was a liberator from Nabonidus' strange rule. The march across the desert, the march toward Babylon, was no ordinary campaign. The city was surrounded by rivers, marshes, and fortified outposts. Cyrus' army had to move with both speed and silence, covering harsh terrain while maintaining discipline. Ancient sources suggest that Cyrus devised one of the most brilliant maneuvers in military history. He diverted the waters of the Euphrates River, lowering its level enough for his troops to march along the riverbed, bypassing Babylon's defenses. Imagine the scene. By night, under the cloak of silence, Persian soldiers wade through the shallow waters, weapons held high. The moon glitters on bronze shields. The river that once protected Babylon now carries its doom. When they reached the gates that opened onto the river, they found them carelessly left unlocked. Babylon, the city of gods and legends, fell without a great battle. Its pride had blinded it. The night the city fell, while details differ across sources, one story endures: the famous feast of Belshazzar. According to later accounts, the Babylonians, confident behind their walls, feasted while Cyrus' forces crept into the city. At the height of the celebration, the Persians struck. Babylon fell in a single night. No great slaughter, no burning of temples, no endless siege, just precision, strategy, and the will of a man who believed his destiny lay in the heart of Mesopotamia. The entry of Cyrus. When Cyrus finally entered Babylon in 539 BC, he did not come as a destroyer. He walked the streets not with fire, but with promise. To the people he declared himself chosen by Marduk, Babylon's chief god, to restore order. He freed captives, restored local gods to their temples, and allowed exiled peoples like the Jews to return to their homelands. For the Babylonians, weary of Nabonidus' neglect, Cyrus appeared not as a foreign conqueror, but as a rightful king. It was here, in Babylon, that the Cyrus cylinder was inscribed, a declaration etched in clay: describing his victory not as a conquest, but as a liberation. To modern historians it has been called the world's first charter of human rights. The road completed the conquest of Babylon marked more than just a military triumph. It was the culmination of Cyrus's vision. From the Aegean to the Persian Gulf, from the mountains of Central Asia to the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, a new empire now stretched, an empire not ruled by fear alone, but by tolerance, respect, and cunning diplomacy. The road to Babylon was the road to immortality. With this single conquest, Cyrus transformed from a regional king into the master of the known world. Foreshadowing, but even as the Persians celebrated, questions lingered in the shadows. Could such an empire built not just on conquest but on mercy and/or could kings after Cyrus maintain the balance of power, faith? The city of Babylon had fallen. The empire of Persia now stretched farther than any before it, a mosaic of languages, faiths, and nations bound together under one crown. Cyrus the Great had carved his name into stone, but even stone crumbles. Every conqueror must face the one enemy that no sword can cut: time. The final campaign in the twilight of his reign. Cyrus was not content to sit idle upon his throne. He was a warrior king, forged in the chaos of battle, and the call of conquest still echoed in his blood. He turned his eyes north, toward the steppes where fierce tribes roamed the wild lands beyond the empire's borders. The Massagetæ, a nomadic people led by their warrior queen Tamiris, stood defiant. The clash that followed became the stuff of legend. Ancient chroniclers disagree on the details. Some say Cyrus marched boldly into their lands, others that he lured them with cunning traps. But all agree on the ending. The battle was fierce, the losses heavy, and Cyrus himself did not return. The Lion of Persia had fallen, the tomb of a king, yet even in death, Cyrus was not forgotten. His body was carried back to the heart of Persia, to the city of Pasargadae, the capital he had built with his own hands. There atop a modest stone platform a tomb was raised. No towering ziggurat, no gilded palace, just a simple structure. White stone blocks, a gabled roof, standing quiet against the horizon. Upon it, an inscription was said to read, "O man, whoever you are and wherever you come from, I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire. Do not begrudge me this little earth that covers my body." In its humility lay his greatness. The legacy of mercy. Cyrus was remembered not just for the lands he conquered, but for how he ruled them. Unlike many kings before him, he did not demand that nations abandon their gods, their tongues, or their ways. He allowed them to live, to worship, to govern their lives within the vast web of the empire. This was not weakness, it was genius. By respecting the diversity of his subjects, Cyrus ensured loyalty where fear alone might have bred rebellion. For the Jews, Cyrus was the liberator who ended their Babylonian exile. For the Babylonians, he was the restorer chosen by Marduk. For the Persians, he was the father of their empire. To the Greeks, even those who later fought against Persia, he remained a figure of admiration. Xenophon, centuries later, would write of him as the model of kingship. The first great empire, the Achaemenid Empire, founded by Cyrus, became the template for all who followed. Roads stretched across deserts and mountains, binding east and west. Messengers carried news faster than ever before. Trade flourished, ideas traveled, and cultures intertwined. Though it would eventually fall to Alexander centuries later, the Persian Empire under Cyrus laid the foundations of global civilization. It was proof that empire could be more than could be a system where many peoples, many gods, and many lands could coexist under one rule, the eternal king. In the centuries that followed, kings and conquerors would rise and fall. Alexander would weep at Cyrus' tomb. Roman emperors would study his rule. Even in modern times, his name echoes in the halls of history. The Cyrus cylinder, discovered in the 19th century, is often hailed as the world's first declaration of human rights, a symbol of justice and freedom carved into clay thousands of years ago. Cyrus was not just a Persian king, he became a figure larger than any nation, a reminder of what leadership could be when tempered with wisdom, vision, and restraint. Immortality. The man was mortal. His empire, like all empires, would one day crumble. But his idea that true power lay not only in conquest, but in respect, in justice, in humanity remained eternal. Cyrus the Great did not live forever, but his shadow still walks with us.